It was a typical night at the club, dim lights, deafening music, and a haze of cigarette smoke hanging in the air. The kind of place where people came to lose themselves, to forget their problems or just to make new ones. And there she was, sitting at the bar, waiting for the next job to go smoothly. She spotted him right away, a big guy, loud and drunk, flashing his cash like he owned the world. They struck a deal and she did her part, but when it came time for him to pay up, he smirked, slurred his speech. "You're good, sweetheart, but not that good. I'm not paying." She had seen people like this before, the kind of man who thinks he's untouchable, invisible, because no one dared to put him in his place. She stayed calm, her voice steady. "We had a deal. Pay up or this gets messy." He laughed. Big mistake. As he turned to walk away, she grabbed his arm, spun him around, and bam, her fist met his jaw, and he hit the floor like a sack of bricks. The crowd around them froze. The bouncer stomped over, eyes wide. "What the hell is going on here?" She shrugged, smoothing her dress. "He forgot how business works," I reminded him. There she was, tucked away in the corner of the bar, her back straight but her shoulders tense, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her. She didn't belong here, not really. This place, it wasn't where she wanted to be, but it was where she had to be. Her name, well, she didn't like to use it that much. Names only made things personal, and in a place like this, it was better to stay invisible. She had a life outside these walls, one that no one here would ever know about, a life where she wasn't just a body for sale. She worked here because she had no choice. Her brother was everything to her, and she would do whatever it took her to give him a life that he deserved. But he was just a kid, and she was his only family. He was reason why she had to put up with the lustful eyes, the insult, and the constant feeling of being used. She hated it. She hated how men thought they would walk in and take what they wanted, how they assumed that because they had money they could control her. She wasn't like the other women here. She didn't enjoy it. She didn't flirt for fun, didn't love the attention. But when you have bills to pay and a little brother depending on you, you shave to swallow your pride. Her hands trembled as she placed drink in front of customers, eyes on the floor, her voice quiet and unassuming. Every part of her wanted to disappear into the background, to leave without anyone noticing, but she couldn't. She had responsibilities, and no matter how much she hated it, she would stay until she had enough to change things, until her brother didn't have to live in the shadows of her choices. But any man who tried to push her too far, to treat her like she was just another transaction, only fueled the fire in her heart. She did not want to be here. She wouldn't let anyone disrespect her. No one could take what wasn't theirs. No one. Her eyes scanned the room like they always did, familiar faces, familiar moves. The same tired men, the ones who came in with nothing but empty promises and wallets full of cash. She wasn't here for them. She was here to get through the night. She hated it, but she had no choice. One more client and then she could go home, get some rest and check on her brother. That's all that mattered that time. Then, something shifted in the air. The door swung open with a small thud, and the crowd parted almost instinctively. In walked a man, tall, dark, with undeniable presence, the kind of man who just did not enter the room, but he took it. His sharp suit, perfectly tailored, made him stand out against the usual crowd of drunk businessmen and off-duty cops. He didn't walk, he commanded the space as he moved. Two bouncers followed closely behind, their eyes scanning the room, ensuring no one dared to get too close. Her gaze followed him as curiosity aroused within her. He didn't even look her way, which was fine by her. She had enough to think about without adding another distraction. But as he made his way towards the VIP section, she overheard a few whispers. "That's him, Nathan Blackwell, the great Nathan." Nathan? The name stuck with her for a split second, but then she shook her head, dismissing it. She didn't know any Nathan, and she certainly didn't have time for rumors. She had a job to do. She wasn't about to lose focus now. She turned back to scan, her eyes narrowing on the next potential client. She just needed to make it through the night. One more hour and she could leave the place behind her, at least until tomorrow. Just as she was about to turn her attention back to the bar, A boss's voice cut through the noise. Lena, get over here. Her stomach tightened at the sound of her name. She had barely made it to the night, and now her boss wanted to drag her into whatever mess that was going on in the VIP section. But there was no arguing. She straightened up, gave a small sigh, and made her way across the room. As she approached the velvet ropes, the bouncer glanced at her, his expression unreadable. VIP, he muttered, lifting the rope. She stepped through, her eyes scanning the group already settled in. That's when she saw him, Nathan. He was sitting at the center of the round table, surrounded by a few intimidating-looking men, Russian, from the way they were talking in rapid-fire Russian, their voices masculine and deep. The air around them felt heavy, like a business deal was unfolding in front of her eyes. Her boss walked over to her, his usual shady grin plastered on his face. You are the translator tonight. The Russians don't speak a word of English, and Nathan, well, he doesn't understand Russian. You'll handle the conversation between them. Simple. Lena stepped forward, cleared her throat softly, and greeted the table. Her presence was barely acknowledged by the Russians. They were too busy talking about themselves in their harsh foreign tongue. But Nathan, he didn't take his eyes off her for a second. It wasn't just that he looked at her. No. It felt like he was assessing her, like he could see through the thin fabric of her dress, the past makeup, and the forced smile. Her gaze was intense, unwavering, almost as if he had already undressed her with his eyes. It made her skin crawl, but at the same time there was a strange burning heat that she couldn't shake. As she stood between the Russians and Nathan, translating all she could, her skin tickled, her every move feeling like it was being watched by those dark, intense eyes. He hadn't said a word to her, but his gaze never left. She couldn't help but feel vulnerable, exposed, as if he knew everything about her without her uttering a single word. He was sitting there, so composed, his presence overwhelming, while she tried to focus on the conversation. But all this while, her mind kept drifting back to him. She could feel his gaze like a weight pressing down on her, burning into her skin. Every time she spoke, every time she turned her head to interpret their words, she could feel his eyes on her. Eyes that were calculating, assessing, but something deeper, darker lurking behind them. Lena stood at the edge of the table, her voice steady despite the nerves cluttering her insides. She translated every word the Russian said into smooth, clear English, then switched effortlessly to Russian as Nathan responded in short, precise sentences. It was a dance of words, and she was the bridge between two worlds. The conversation flowed, and though she tried to keep her focus only on the words, she could feel Nathan's gaze on her, heavy and unrelenting. It was as if he wasn't just listening to her translations, but studying every subtle movement she made. The deal itself was intense. The air thick with tension. Numbers were thrown around, big numbers, millions. Nathan's tone never wavered, calm and authoritative, while the Russians grew more animated, gesturing wildly as they argued over terms. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Nathan leaned back, a slight smirk playing on his lips. "We have a deal," he said, his voice low but firm. Lena translated his words, and the Russians nodded, shaking hands with Nathan. A round of drinks was poured to seal the agreement, but Lena quietly stepped back, keeping her distance. She wasn't here to celebrate. She was here to survive the night and leave unnoticed. But before she could slip away, her boss caught her by the arm, pulling her aside. "Lena, wait," he said, his grin wider than usual. "What now?" she asked, her voice laced with exhaustion. "You are needed again tomorrow," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "Nathan wants you back as his translator." Her brows knitted together in confusion. "Why me? Doesn't he have people for that?" Her boss chuckled, shaking his head. "Lena, you don't get it, do you? You have just won the lottery working for Nathan Blackwell. Do you have any idea who he is? This could change everything for you." Lena's heart sank. She wasn't sure what he meant by everything, but she knew one thing. Getting involved with someone like Nathan could be dangerous. Yet her boss's words echoed in her mind. "You have won the lottery, and this could change everything for you." She swallowed hard, nodding as she turned back to the bar, her thoughts toiling. Tomorrow is going to be another long night. The next day, when Lena showed up to Nathan, the setting had changed. Instead of the club, she was directed to a high-end, ultra-modern penthouse overlooking the city. She was nervous but kept her cool. Nathan was already waiting, calm and collected, but this time there was an edge to him. He was alone, no Russians, no one, just him. He handed her a file and asked her to translate a series of documents. As she skims through, Lena realizes this isn't just another business deal. It's something shady. The documents mentioned offshore accounts, coded messages, and names that sounded like they belonged to powerful and dangerous people. Nathan watched her closely, and when she hesitated, he calmly says, "You, darling, you are already in. Lena, whether you like it or not, you are in." But before she could question what he meant, the door burst open, and two men stormed in, armed and looked furious. They spoke in rapid Russian, demanding something from Nathan. Nathan stayed calm, but Lena froze in place. One of the men shouted at her in Russian, accusing her of being a spy. Nathan steps between them, his voice sharp as he says, "She's with me." The tension escalated, and just when it seemed like things were about to turn violent, Nathan moved quickly, disarming one of the men and pressing him against the wall. "You've got 5 seconds to leave," he growls. The men retreat, but not without a warning. "You're making enemies, Blackwell." As the door slams shut, Lena's heart races. Nathan turns to her, his voice low but commanding. "You wanted to know what this job is? Welcome to my world. Now you decide. Do you stay or do you walk away?" Lena crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "Pay me for tonight and I'm out," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the chaos still buzzing around them. "I didn't sign up for danger, Nathan. If something happens to me, who's going to take care of my brother?" Nathan's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a sleek black wallet, and handed her a stack of crisp bills without a word. She took them, her hands trembling slightly, but her gaze remained unshaken. "Thanks," she said coldly, turning on her heel and heading for the door. But just as she reached the door, she paused. She glanced over her shoulder, her gaze locking with Nathan's for a moment, longer than she intended. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something that almost made her second-guess herself. Almost. "Well, I haven't finished the job for today," she said flatly, her tone cutting through the tension. "I'll finish it, then I'm gone." Nathan's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, but didn't say a word. Lena walked back to the table where the Russian's papers were laid scattered. She sat down, her mind in a mess of conflicting thoughts. She'll do the job, just as she said, but after tonight, she'd be gone for good. Or at least that's what she told herself. Lena sat back down, her fingers brushing over the papers as she resumed translating. But as she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that Nathan wasn't listening. His sharp, focused demure from earlier had softened. His eyes weren't on the Russians or the documents, they were on her. She stopped mid-sentence, irritated, and asked him, "Are you even paying attention?" Nathan leaned forward, his gaze steady and unreadable. "Are you hungry? Do you care to have some food?" he asked, his voice low, almost casual. Lena blinked, caught off guard. She hadn't expected that. I'm starving," she admitted, her tone still clipped. Without another word, Nathan pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up outside the building. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Let's go," he said. Lena hesitated but followed, unsure of what to expect. The car ride was quiet, tension hanging in the air like an unspoken question. They arrived at a high-end sushi restaurant, the kind of place where Lena had only seen in movies. They sat across from each other as the soft hum of the restaurant filled the silence. Nathan broke the silence. "So, what do you do for a living?" Lena almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. She leaned back, her eyes meeting his with a challenging look. "Pleasing men," she said bluntly. Nathan raised an eyebrow, his expression calm but curious. Pleasing? How? She smirked, her tone laced rebelliously. Satisfying their desires, for money of course. For a moment, Nathan said nothing. He simply studied her, as if trying to piece together a puzzle he hadn't expected to find. He hadn't thought much about who she was. He saw her at the club, but now, hearing it laid out so plainly, something about her honesty unsettled him. I see, he said finally, his voice neutral. And do you like it? Lena's smirk flattened and she shrugged, her eyes looking down to the table. Does it matter? It pays the bills. Nathan nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving her. For the first time in years, he found himself interested, not in the image she projected, but in the person sitting in front of him. The sushi arrived, neatly arranged on neat black plates, but Lena barely tasted it. She was hyper-aware of Nathan's presence across the table, his calm, controlled energy, unsettling yet strangely comforting. Nathan, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease. He didn't push her to talk, but occasionally glanced her way, his curiosity evident in the faint corners of his brow. When Lena finally put down her chopsticks, Nathan signaled the waiter without a word. The bill was handled swiftly, and soon she found herself back into the sleek black car, watching the city lights blur past as they drove back to the club. Once there, she finished her translation work effectively, trying to shake off the strange feeling Nathan had left her with during dinner. When the job was done, her boss handed her another wad of cash and she stuffed it into the bag before heading home. But as Lena approached her apartment, something felt off. Her heart sank when she noticed the door slightly opened, swinging faintly in the night breeze. Her brother never left the door open. Ellie? She called out, stepping inside cautiously. The sight that greeted her made her stomach drop. The small living room was in a complete mess. Chairs overturned, the coffee table shattered, and papers everywhere. Her heart rate quickened as she moved further inside, her voice rising. Ellie, where are you? She ran to his bedroom, but it was empty. The bed covers were tossed aside, his favorite Avenger toy abandoned on the floor. She started panicking as she searched the entire apartment, no sign of him. Lena's hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone. Her first instinct was to call the police, but she knew how long that could take, and every second felt like an eternity. There was only one person who came to her mind, Nathan. Without thinking twice, she dialed his number, her voice shaking as soon as he picked up. Nathan, it's Lena, she said, barely holding back her tears. I need your help. My brother, he's gone. Someone broke into my place and I can't find him. There was a brief pause before Nathan's voice came through, calm and steady. Where are you? At my apartment, she stammered. Stay there, he said firmly. Lock the door, I'm on my way. Lena hung up, her heart racing as she stared at the wreckage around her. She felt helpless, but she clung to one thing. Nathan was coming. And for some reason, that gave her a glimmer of hope. Lena paced the living room, her hands trembled as she clutched her kitchen knife. The mess around her was overwhelming. Chairs overturned, broken glasses scattered on the floor, and Ellie's favorite blanket abandoned on the couch. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. A sharp knock at the door startled her. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. It's me, Nathan's voice called from the other side. She unlocked the door and Nathan stepped in, his presence instantly commanding the chaotic space. Two men followed closely behind him, their expressions unreadable. Nathan's eyes scanned the apartment, lingering briefly on the broken furniture before settling on her. Tell me what happened, he said, his voice calm but urgent. Lena swallowed, but recounted everything. Her words stumbling over each other as Nathan listened carefully. His sharp gaze darkened as she finished. Without a word, he pulled out his phone and began issuing commands to someone on the other end. His men moved swiftly, examining the apartment. One of them called out from Ellie's room, holding a folded piece of paper. Nathan took it, his jaws tightened as he read the message. You have crossed the line, Blackwell. You took something of ours, now you are taking something of yours. Lena's stomach churned as she read over his shoulder. The weight of the situation pressed down on her chest. Ellie was caught in the crossfire of something far beyond her understanding. Nathan's face hardened, his calm exterior masking a storm beneath. He turned to his men, giving silent instruction with a sharp nod. They left without hesitation. "We will get him back, I promise," Nathan said finally, his voice low and steady. Lena nodded, her determination hardening. She had no choice but to trust him. Nathan's gaze remained on her for a moment, then he stepped towards the door. "This ends tonight." Lena clenched her fist as fear consumed her. She would do whatever it took to bring Ellie home. If I hadn't met him, she thought bitterly, her mind replaying the moment she first saw Nathan at the club, the powerful, confident man who seemed untouchable, and now her little brother was gone, sucked into the dangerous world he carried with him. Her chest tightened as tears threatened to spill. She cursed herself for agreeing to work that night, for translating that damned business deal. If she had just stayed in her lane, done her usual job, none of this would have happened. Ellie would be home, curled up in his bed, safe and sound. She clenched her fist, her nails digging into her palms. "Why did I let myself get involved?" she whispered, her voice trembling with frustration. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. The money her boss had offered for the job was too tempting to refuse, and with bills piling up, she had felt like she had no choice. Everything she did was for Ellie, to keep him fed, clothed, and in school. Yet now, her decision had put him in harm's way. Lena shot up from the couch, pacing the room as her emotions boiled over. To scream, to throw something, to undo every decision that she had led to this moment, but no amount of anger would bring Ellie back. Her thoughts turned to Nathan. He had promised to find Ellie, but how could she trust him? He was the reason this was happening in the first place. His world of wealth and power came with enemies who had no problem ripping apart innocent lives. Even as the anger coursed through her, a flicker of hope crept in. Nathan had come for her, hadn't he? He had taken charge without hesitation, mobilizing his men like a general preparing for battle. And despite her fury, a small part of her clung to the hope that his promise would bear fruits. Ellie's sake, she had to believe it. Nathan's black car pulled up outside her building, and Nathan stepped out, gesturing for Lena to enter into the car. She hesitated, her instincts screaming not to trust him. But the thought of staying in this wrecked apartment alone was unbearable. "Get in," Nathan said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Lena climbed into the back seat, her mind racing with a mixture of anger, fear, and exhaustion. Nathan slid in beside her, and the door shut with a quiet thud. "We are not staying here," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "It's not safe." She wanted to argue, to tell him she didn't need his protection, but the truth was painfully clear. She had no idea how to handle this situation. She stayed silent, watching the city blur past the tinted windows as the car sped through the streets. After a tense, silent drive, they arrived at a high-rise building in the heart of downtown, the sleek glass structure looming over the city like a fortress. Nathan led her inside, past the marble lobby, and into a private elevator. The doors opened to a spacious penthouse, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view to the city lights. The air smelled faintly of leather and cedar, and everything about the place screamed wealth and power. "You will stay here until I sort this out," Nathan said, his tone leaving no room for debate. Lena's eyes scanned the room, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She stood by the window, her arms crossed tightly, while Nathan made a call on his phone, speaking in low, clipped tones she couldn't quite understand. When he hung up, he turned to his expression unreadable. "You are safe here, no one will find you." Lena scoffed, her voice laced with bitterness. "Safe? My brother is out there, and I'm stuck here in your fancy cage." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he walked over to a small bar and poured himself a drink. "I've got my men working on it. They'll find him." She glared at him, her frustration boiling over. "You don't get it, do you? Ellie is all I have. I can't just sit here and wait while you will do exactly that," Nathan interrupted, his voice cold and sharp. "You'll stay here Stay out of sight and let me handle this. Lena clenched her fist, but before she could act, there was a small, soft knock on the door. One of Nathan's men entered, handing him a tablet. Nathan stared at the screen for a moment, his expression darkening. "We have a lead," he said finally, his voice low but charged with determination. "The people who took your brother are moving him tonight. We will take action." Lena's heart skipped a beat, a flicker of hope cutting through her fear. "Where? When?" Nathan glanced at her, his eyes hard but steady. "That's not your concern. I'll handle it." "No," Lena said firmly, stepping closer. "I am coming with you." Nathan stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tightening. Finally, he exhaled sharply, putting his glass down. "Fine, but you do exactly as I say." Lena nodded, her fear outweighed by her desperation. She had been powerless for too long. Now she is ready to fight for her brother. The black SUV cut through the night like a predator stalking its prey, the city lights fading into shadow as they neared the outcast. Lena sat in the back, her fingers gripping the edge of the seat. Nathan glanced at her. "Stay close to me. No matter what happens, don't leave my side, okay?" Lena nodded, swallowing hard, her heart pounding as they turned into a deserted road which led to an abandoned warehouse. The building loomed in the darkness, its windows shattered and walls covered in graffiti. "This is it," Nathan said, as his voice low. The SUV came to a stop, and Nathan's men ran out, moving with practiced precision. Nathan opened Lena's door and motioned for her to stay behind him. As they approached the warehouse, the sound of muffled voices and the faint hum of machinery seeped through the cracked walls. Nathan raised a hand, signaling his men to spread out. Lena's breath hitched as they slipped inside. The air was thick with tension. Every step echoed into the dangerous space. Crates were stacked and shadows danced in the dim of light of flickering bulbs. Her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of Ellie. Then she saw it, a figure tied to a chair in the corner, slumped but unmistakably small. "Ellie, Ellie," she whispered, her voice catching. She started to move, but Nathan grabbed her wrist, holding her back. "Wait!" he hissed. Lena's heart broke at the sight of her brother, bruised but alive. She turned to Nathan, her eyes pleading. He gave her a subtle nod, then signaled his men to move in. But just as they stepped forward, a sharp metallic click echoed throughout the warehouse. "Not another step, Nathan." A figure emerged from the shadows, a gun raised and pointed directly at Nathan. More men appeared, their weapons trained on Nathan's team. Lena caught her breath as she recognized the man holding the gun, tall, scarred, with a chilling smirk. "You really thought you could take what's mine and walk away?" the man sneered with a vengeful voice. Nathan didn't flinch, his expression as cold as ice. "You have made a mistake." The man chuckled darkly. "No, Blackwell, the mistake was yours." The tension was suffocating, the air electric with danger. Lena's pulse raced as she clung to Nathan's arm, her mind screaming for a way out. "Let the boy go," Nathan said, his voice calm but deadly. The man's smirk widened. "Oh, we'll see about that. But first, let's have a little chat about boundaries." With that, he raised his gun, his finger hovering over the trigger, pointing at Nathan. Well, what will happen next to Lena, Nathan, and Ellie? Stay tuned for the next part. It won't take too long to be updated. Turn on the notification bar and subscribe for more interesting stories. Bye! See you next time.